Welcome to episode 272 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Law Sky. We're almost at the end of July, and the 2026 World Cup is already almost 2 weeks ago. So I wanted to have one last episode this month about the World Cup. Enjoy the show. It's July 30, 1930. Montevideo, Estadio Centenario, Uruguay against Argentina, the first World Cup final, a repeat of the 1928 Olympic final. The Rio de la Plata rivalry. 2 teams, 2 balls, 1 Belgian referee, 1 new stadium, 1 trophy whose ceremony would turn out stranger than the official plan. Argentina lead 2-1 at halftime. Then Uruguay come back. Uruguay 4, Argentina 2, the first world champions. But how did we get here? Start with the idea. International football existed long before the World Cup. England and Scotland played in 1872. The Olympic Games gave football a public international stage in 1908 and 1912, but there was no World Championship owned by football itself. FIFA had been founded in Paris in 1904. We covered that in episode 202. At first, FIFA was fragile. The home nations stood partly outside it. There were fights over amateurism. A rival amateur body even appeared in 1909, which we covered in episode 138. Then came the First World War. International football broke, and FIFA almost broke with it. And then came Jules Rimet. We told that story in episode 121. Rimet becomes FIFA president in 1921 and starts turning a weak federation into a global program. His problem is the Olympics. Olympic football is prestigious, but Olympic football belongs to the Olympic movement. That means amateurism, and football is moving beyond amateurism. Professionalism is real. Club football is growing. Central Europe is developing fast. Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Italy, the Danubian football world is thinking deeply about tactics, international competition, and the future. South America has the Copa America already. The game is too big to live forever inside the Olympic box. And then Uruguay changes everything. Paris 1924. Uruguay arrive at the Olympics, and Europe discovers that South American football is not decorative. It is elite. They win gold. Amsterdam 1928. Uruguay win gold again, and this time the final is against Argentina. Of course it is. Uruguay and Argentina have been sharpening one another for decades across the Rio de la Plata, Buenos Aires and Montevideo. Steamers, cups, arguments, players, styles and memory. The 1928 Olympic final takes 2 matches, 1-1, then a replay. Uruguay win 2-1, and now FIFA has the proof. At the Amsterdam Congress in 1928, FIFA approves its own World Championship. In 1929, Uruguay is selected to host. The choice makes sense. Olympic champions and centenary year in 1930. A government willing to support the tournament, an offer to help pay travel costs, and a promise to build a modern stadium, the Centenario. We talked about that in episode 260. It's a giant bowl carved into Montevideo, fresh concrete, winter rain, a mad construction race, and a building that missed the first days of the tournament, but opened on July 18. The first World Cup itself is still improvised. FIFA invites its members. The ideal is 16 teams. 13 arrive. Europe hesitates. No England, no Scotland, no Italy, Spain, Germany, or Austria. Only France, Belgium, Romania, and Yugoslavia cross the Atlantic. Egypt intend to come, but bad weather delays them, and the ship leaves without them. They miss the boat, literally. And on July 13, the tournament begins. We covered that in episode 255. France beat Mexico 4-1 at Positos. Lucien Laurent scores the first goal in World Cup history. And then the tournament starts gathering speed. Argentina beat France 1-0 in the match where the referee blows 6 minutes early. Argentina beat Mexico 6-3. Then Chile 3-1. Uruguay wait for the Centenario. Beat Peru 1-0. Beat Romania 4-0. The United States surprise people. Yugoslavia knock out Brazil. And then the semifinals arrive. Argentina 6, United States 1. Uruguay 6, Yugoslavia 1. And now the first World Cup final becomes exactly what history would have wanted if history wrote with too much symmetry. Uruguay against Argentina. Again, the 1928 Olympic final repeated. Same rivalry, same argument. Same feeling that the World Championship must pass through the river. Now the final. John Langenus of Belgium is the referee. Tall, formal, remembered in shirt, tie and knickerbockers. Given the tension and rivalry, Langenus had security worries and an escape plan ready, should tension boil over. What is certain is this: Montevideo is full, anxious, and alive. The official attendance is usually given around 80,000, and thousands of Argentines have crossed the river, not all of them able to reach the stadium because the transport arrangements simply cannot contain the demand. The first World Cup is still a free-spirited, almost amateur affair in its machinery, but not in its meaning. Before the match even starts, there's an argument about the ball. Argentina want their ball, Uruguay want theirs. Langenus compromises. Argentina's ball in the first half, Uruguay's ball in the second. And that is perfect. The first World Cup final cannot even agree on the object at the center of the sport. 12th minute. Pablo Dorado scores. Uruguay 1, Argentina 0. The Centenario erupts. But Argentina are not there as guests. So in the 20th minute, Carlos Percelle equalizes. 1-1. 38th minute. Guillermo Stábile scores. Argentina 2, Uruguay 1. Stábile is the tournament's great scorer. He finishes with 8 goals. At halftime, Argentina lead the first World Cup final. The hosts are behind. The Olympic champions are being beaten. The new tournament is leaning towards Buenos Aires. But then the second half begins, and Uruguay become Uruguay. 58th minute, Pedro Sea scores. 2-2. 68th minute, Santos Iriarte scores. Goal. Uruguay 3, Argentina 2. Argentina protest. Argentina push. Francisco Varaccio is injured, but still fighting. Luis Monti, the hard man in midfield, has his own burden. He had received threats before the match. He's playing inside pressure most of us cannot imagine. Then the 89th minute, Hector Castro, El Manco, the one-armed forward who had scored the first goal in the Centenario's history against Peru. He scores again. Uruguay 4, Argentina 2. Final whistle, and Uruguay are world champions. And then comes one of the little mysteries of the first World Cup. The planned ceremony was elegant. The teams would climb to the Tribuna Olímpica. The winners would stand on one side of the Torre del Homenaje, the runners-up on the other. The flag would be raised, the anthem would play, and Jules Rimet would present the World Cup trophy. Gold medals for Uruguay, silver medals for Argentina. But that is just not what happened on the field. Instead, Uruguay's players stay on the pitch. They watch the Uruguayan flag rise and hear the anthem, and then they run a lap of honor, carrying a silver cup. Not the World Cup trophy, but a mystery silver cup. Official film shows it. A photograph shows Pablo Dorado holding it. What exactly was it? Possibly one of the old Rio de la Plata trophies. Possibly something else. The evidence isn't clear, and I love that. The first World Cup final gives us a clean score and a messy ceremony. Football had created a world championship before it had learned how to stage the ritual. José Nasazzi, El Gran Mariscal, is the captain of the champions, and that matters because Nasazzi had captained Uruguay to Olympic gold in 1924, and again in 1928, and now the World Cup in 1930. Uruguay's first global football age has a captain, not just a player, a symbol of command. But so what? The World Cup worked. Not perfectly, not smoothly, not with a full field, not with all the strongest European nations, but it worked. The final drew a huge crowd. The matches were competitive. South America filled the tournament with quality and feeling. Rimet had proof. The World Cup was no longer just a governance theory. It had a champion. It had a final. It had photographs, a scoreboard. Uruguay 4, Argentina 2. That is what made the idea irreversible. The World Cup immediately changed the football calendar. The fight with IOC over amateurism didn't vanish, but FIFA had made its declaration of independence. Football is absent from the 1932 Olympics in Los Angeles, and I'll tell that story in a few days. And then comes 1934, Italy. Now the World Cup is so popular that it needs qualification. 32 countries enter for 16 places. And we covered that very first road to the World Cup in episode 223. In 1930, FIFA has to persuade teams to come. By 1934, FIFA has to keep teams out. That is how fast the concept turns. But 1934 also tells us something more uncomfortable. The World Cup begins with Rimet's belief that football can build international cooperation, and with Uruguay as a deliberate statement that the game doesn't belong only to Europe. That ideal matters. But the tournament also proves something states immediately understand. Hosting world football gives you image power. Uruguay's 1930 tournament is not modern sport washing. It is a centenary, a football nation, and a host with a serious sporting claim. But it is also national projection. It's one country saying, look at us, we are modern, we are global, we are champions. Italy in 1934 takes that logic into darker territory. Mussolini understands the World Cup as propaganda. And then 1938 arrives in the shadow of war. And the modern tournament, for all its beauty, still lives inside that contradiction. Unity and power, joy and money, global belonging and political use. That doesn't cancel the World Cup. It explains why it matters so much. Billions do not care because FIFA tell them to care. They care because the tournament creates collective emotion at a scale almost nothing else can match. And that is why governments want it. And that is why sponsors want it. And that is why fans keep trying to rescue it from the people who own the paperwork. After winning in 1930, Uruguay do something that looks strange now. They don't defend the title. They stay away from Italy in 1934, still angry that so many Europeans refused to cross the ocean in 1930. Then 1938 is in Europe again, and South American resentment continues. Then World War II stops the tournament completely. No 1942, no 1946. And when the World Cup returns in 1950, Uruguay return too, and win again. The Maracanazo. We covered that on July 16. So Uruguay's World Cup story is almost impossibly concentrated. 1924, 28, 30, and 50. That is why Uruguay have 4 stars above the crest. 2 Olympic golds in the FIFA-organized Olympic football tournaments before the World Cup existed, and 2 World Cups. You can argue the categories if you like. Uruguay don't. They wear the stars. The final also gives us one of the great player quirks in football history. Luis Monti plays his final for Argentina. 4 years later, he plays the 1934 World Cup final for Italy and wins. Same man, 2 World Cup finals, 2 countries. A perfect example of how early international football still had loose edges that modern eligibility rules would never allow in quite the same way. And finally, everything flows from this. 1934 proves scale, 1938 proves continuity, 1950 restores the tournament after war, 1954 gives us the miracle of Bern, 1958 gives us Pelé, 1970 gives Brazil the 3rd title and the Jules Rimet trophy forever, 1986 gives us Maradona, 2022 gives us Messi. And now, after this 2026 summer, the World Cup has reached a size and weight that Rimet could probably imagine in spirit, but surely not in machinery. 48 nations, 3 host countries, billions watching, and still the same basic promise. Put the world in one tournament and let football decide, at least for a month, who gets to tell the story. That promise begins here, not with perfection, but with Uruguay and Argentina arguing over the ball, with a Belgian referee, with a fresh stadium, with a second-half comeback, and with a mystery silver cup, and with Nasazzi's Uruguay proving that the World Cup could live. Before we go, 3 things to take away from July 30, 1930. First, the first World Cup final was the perfect proof of concept. The tournament had been improvised, doubted, and half attended by Europe, but the final gave it scale, drama, and legitimacy. Second, Uruguay's win completed a global trilogy: Olympic gold in 1924, Olympic gold in 28, and World Cup in 1930, all captained by José Nasazzi. And third, the World Cup was born from idealism, but immediately revealed power. It could connect nations, but it could also project nations. That tension has never gone away. On this day in 1930, Uruguay beat Argentina 4-2 at the Estadio Centenario. Dorado scored, Sea scored, Iriarte scored, Castro scored. Uruguay became world champions. The World Cup stopped being an experiment and became the biggest stage in the beautiful game. That is all for episode 272 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. If you want more soccer or football history in your podcast feed, please subscribe, rate the show 5 stars, or share it with your friends. More people will then get to know the show, and I'll get more ideas for future episodes. And thank you for doing that. Tomorrow, go to July 31st, 1971. Halifax upsetting Manchester United in the Watley Cup, and how hooliganism reared its ugly head already then. See you then.